The horn antenna is a transmitter or receiver of radio waves. What makes the horn antenna ideal for transmitting and receiving data is that it can be used for different distances. It can be used for short distances or it can be used for long distances. The horn antenna measures electromagnetic interference to get this data that is being transmitted to it. The horn antenna has a flared waveguide shaped like a horn. And there's different shapes, such as pyramidal, sectoral, conical, exponential. These different shapes of the horn allow different distances to be done. For example, the exponential horn is used for long distance, such as satellites across the world, whereas pyramidal is used in everyday devices. Now, the reason why we don't always use exponential, for example, is that exponential is very difficult to manufacture, whereas pyramidal is something that's very easy to manufacture, so it is much more preferred in terms of cost. What the horn antenna does is it directs beam radios at high frequencies. To be more specific, it is 1 gigahertz to 20 gigahertz. That being said, it's used for broadband and ultra broadband as well as satellite and microwave communications. Again, the horn antenna is a great device because it'll allow you to transmit or receive data over these long distances that can prove to be difficult for other sort of antennas, whereas a horn antenna, depending on the shape of the horn, it can work for different distances.
A horn antenna functions similarly to an acoustic antenna, amplifying electromagnetic waves and slowly adjusting it from the impedance of a tube to the impedance of space. The electromagnetic waves radiate from the horn as spherical wavefronts, with one larger lobe coming from the center and smaller lobes radiating from the edges.
There are many practical applications for the horn antenna. For example, the horn antenna is used as a feed for large radio astronomy, satellite tracking, and communication dishes. Now, for these devices, because they are transmitting data over a long distance, an exponential waveguide is needed. For an exponential waveguide it's simply better for these long distances. Now, the reason why the exponential horn is better is because there's little loss between what is being sent and what is being received. For data that is being transferred over these extremely large distances, this is vital that the information that is being fed back in does not have much of a difference compared to what is being outputted from the original antenna. However, because of the cost, the exponential horns are not seen very often and are only used for these big projects. For smaller projects and everyday devices, we can see pyramidal and conical horn antennas. For example, the horn antennas are used as a directive antenna for radar guns, automatic doors, and microwave radiometers. The pyramidal and conical horn are ideal for these situations because they are so accessible, they're cheap, and they work for the distance that they are given. There is not much loss for the small distance that they are being used, so that's why they work in these situations. As you can see at the bottom, there's a radar gun that has a conical horn antenna. Again, as I mentioned, conical and pyramidal are great for everyday devices that do not need to have a large distance because over these long distances there would be a significant loss in data from what is being sent.
Horn antenna properties can be modeled using OpenEMS. Using OpenEMS, we can calculate the far-field pattern and S-parameter of a horn antenna, as well as plot the far-field pattern. Our paper focuses on quadruple-ridged horn design for a dual-polarized ultra-wideband horn antenna. Right now, it is more common to use dual polarizations instead of quadruple-ridged horns. The purpose of the quadruple-ridged horn proposed in the paper improves the return loss when the horn adjusts the impedance of the electromagnetic waves to the impedance of space.
The quadruple-ridged square waveguide has two parts. It has a square quadruple-ridged waveguide and a shorting plate. The waveguide itself is a square shape with four ridges of two orthogonal polarizations. It has heights and widths of listed, and the aperture and length are also listed as well, respectively. Now, the waveguide is very important in the horn antenna. The reason being is that it is what allows the antenna to receive and transmit data. It is attached to the coaxial cable, and this is where the signal is leaving and entering. the flare horn, it does not transmit the data, but instead it helps with the distance. But as far as the transmission of data is concerned, it is not involved. It only affects the distance. And that being said, everything that's being received or being transmitted is in this waveguide. And it's very important that the waveguide has a certain impedance. Now, to transmit and receive data, you have to match the impedance of air. The flare horn does have some impedance that helps along with this. So the waveguide does not have to meet the impedance of air. However, it has to be of a specific value with the flare horn to match the impedance of air, so that way data can be transmitted and received. As well, there's a shorting plate, which is the cavity back, and this ensures a significantly lower loss in waveguide transitions. As mentioning earlier, these exponential horns, they need less loss. That is their entire goal, for that, so that they can work over long distance and also return almost exactly what was being sent out. And this is what helps with that, the cavity back. So that way, you receive almost identically what was being sent out. This is also in pyramidal and conical. However, given that the smaller distance is easier controlled, but when you're talking from the Earth to outer space, it is definitely very important that you have a little loss between the waveguide transitions. Tapering the quadridge in the horn. As mentioned earlier, there is a certain impedance that the waveguide and space have that need to be matched, so that way data can be transmitted and received. And this is where the flared horn comes into play. To have a smooth transition between the waveguide and space, the transmission of data, the flare horn needs to be there, and it needs to be of some height and width to have an impedance that would be enough for the waveguide to match the impedance of air. What they have done in this paper is they have a flared horn that is divided into 10 sections. Each section is 0.4 centimeters, and with each division, the horn is more and more flared out. As you can see in the middle picture, this demonstrates what they have done in the paper, with each division flaring out more, with 10 divisions and 0.4 centimeters of each division. Now, to the right of that picture is the operating frequency. As you can see, if the frequencies are not in between the two maximums, there will be no transmission of data. Whereas if you are within the bounds of those two maximums, there will be the transmission of data. You can see this with the two maximums. They are working at that point, and the two minimums are where there is no transmission of data. Now, the most left picture is the quadruple square waveguide. This is the figure that was being discussed in the previous slide.